Most people think SNAP cuts happen quietly, far away, and slowly. But what's happening right now in Alabama proves that one single law can shift hundreds of millions of dollars and put food security at risk almost overnight. Because buried inside the so-called Big Beautiful Act is a change that most Americans haven't fully understood yet. And for states like Alabama, the consequences could be severe. Here's the key number you need to know: $176 million. That's how much SNAP funding responsibility could shift from the federal government directly onto the state of Alabama. Not next decade, not someday in theory, but as a real budget pressure starting now, with even bigger risks coming in the next few years. To understand why this matters, you first need to understand how SNAP has traditionally worked. For decades, SNAP benefits themselves have been federally funded. States helped administer the program, but the federal government carried the biggest financial weight. That structure protected low-income families from political swings and state budget shortfalls. The Big Beautiful Act quietly changes that balance. Under this law, states are being asked to absorb far more of the cost, without any guarantee they'll receive enough federal support to cover it. In Alabama, that shift could mean a $176 million hole in funding. And that's not just a budget number, that's groceries, that's meals, that's survival. According to the Alabama Department of Public Health, 17% of adults in the state already experience food insecurity. Among children, the situation is even worse. Nearly 23% don't always know where their next meal is coming from. Those numbers existed before this funding shift. Now imagine what happens if SNAP benefits are reduced, delayed, or harder to access. Hunger policy advocates are sounding the alarm. Latrell Clifford Wood from Alabama Rise says the state has already seen what life looks like when SNAP support weakens. During last year's government shutdown, SNAP disruptions caused an immediate surge in demand at food banks. Families who had never needed emergency food before suddenly found themselves lining up. Food banks were overwhelmed. Pantries ran low. Volunteers struggled to keep up. That wasn't a theory, that was real life. And according to Wood, this funding shift could recreate that crisis, but on a much larger scale. Local grocery stores feel it too. At Food Outlet, store manager Reginald Kemp says more than half of his customers rely on SNAP to put food on the table. When SNAP dollars disappear, stores don't just lose sales, communities lose access. Fewer SNAP dollars means fewer groceries bought locally. That hurts small businesses, that hurts workers, that hurts entire neighborhoods. Some people argue communities will figure it out, but the math doesn't lie. When SNAP weakens, food banks do not replace it dollar for dollar. Charities simply don't have the capacity to cover gaps this large. And the Big Beautiful Act doesn't stop with Alabama's $176 million risk. More changes are already scheduled. Starting in 2027, the USDA plans to reduce the share of SNAP administrative costs it covers, dropping from 50% down to just 25%. That means states must pay more simply to keep the program running. Then in 2028, another rule kicks in. A new quality control incentive will require states to match funds based on their SNAP payment error rate. If Alabama's error rate exceeds federal targets, the state could be forced to cover up to 15% of the entire program cost. That's not a penalty in theory, that's a budget breaker in practice. For states with limited tax revenue, lawmakers face impossible choices: cut benefits, tighten eligibility, delay payments, or divert money from schools, healthcare, and infrastructure. None of those choices help families already struggling with food costs. And here's where SNAP connects directly to Social Security recipients. Many seniors receive both Social Security and SNAP. Even a small reduction in SNAP can wipe out the entire benefit of a COLA increase. A retiree might see a $50 Social Security increase only to lose $80 in food assistance. On paper, income goes up. In real life, purchasing power goes down. That's why this issue matters far beyond Alabama. What happens here becomes a blueprint for other states. If federal SNAP responsibility keeps shifting downward, more states will face the same pressure. And once states start cutting, restoring benefits becomes extremely difficult. Advocates say the window to act is now. Latrell Wood urges residents to contact their legislators directly and make it clear that food assistance is not optional. It's foundational. SNAP is not a handout. It's an economic stabilizer. It keeps families fed, stores open, and healthcare costs lower. Every SNAP dollar generates local economic activity. Remove it, and the damage ripples outward. Some officials say communities will come together again like they did during past shutdowns. But resilience has limits. People cannot budget their way out of empty cupboards. Children cannot focus on school while hungry. Seniors cannot stretch fixed incomes when food prices keep rising. The Big Beautiful Act didn't just change a law, it shifted risk from Washington to states. From states to families. From families to children and seniors who have the least room to absorb it. Alabama is now on the front line of that shift, and what happens next may determine whether SNAP remains a reliable lifeline or becomes a patchwork program dependent on state budgets and political priorities. This isn't about politics, it's about food. And once food security is compromised, everything else starts to fall apart.